Hello, hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me. We're starting in 2.5 minutes. Hello, hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me. We're starting in 2.5 minutes. Hello, hello, hello. Yep, people can hear me. Thanks, Rod, for letting me know. And it's good to see some regulars here. So we're going to be kicking off at 1 at the top of the hour. And it looks like that's going to be coming up pretty soon, about 1.5 minutes right now. And good to see a lot of regs here. So we've got Tony Mule, Tracy, and William Agard, and Andrew. You guys have all been here every week, the whole time. 41 weeks right now. Good to see Kathy from Arizona, another regular. John. We've got Michael Stein. Lots of regs here, regulars, everybody here. Good to see you again, Chuck, Les Campbell, Lance Burns, Rael, Cynthia again, Jim, Stuart Braithwaite from New Zealand, Kiora. All right, so all the regulars are in the house. Sandy, good to see you. Tom, everybody there. Rod Shelley, good to see you guys. Okay, so we're going to be starting in 30 minutes, and then, we can do our afterglow at the end, where we can do some extra questions and answers and hang out and shout outs and all that good stuff. But what we're going to do here is we are going to kick off at 1, and we're going to jump into training. Got a lot of good stuff for you this week. Going to be doing gradients, but here we go. Countdown. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Live from Lockdown, episode number 41. So this is 41 weeks we've been doing this. Can you believe it? This started off as something I thought was going to last for a month or two, and here we are pretty much a year later. But the good thing about this is we've built a great community here, even though a lot of you are being part of the cafe crew or the community from photoshopCAFE for many years, either on YouTube or on the website, which has actually been going for 20 years now, photoshopcafe.com. Shout out there in the comments if any of you have ever been on photoshopCAFE for that whole time. But the nice thing is it's kind of given us an opportunity to bring us together as a family here. And even if you're brand new, welcome to the family. You're part of the crew. We're welcoming to everybody and of all skill levels. So it's great to have you with us this week. And let me just grab some water here. There we go. I said water, it was actually tea. And I'm really excited. We've got an action-packed episode for you this week. So we're going to be doing a masterclass on gradients, and then we're going to be doing Fix My Photos. So for those of you who uploaded your photos, we're going to be looking at some of those a little bit later on. So anyway, hi to the regulars. Welcome to first timers. People are just kind of getting in here now, I know, because of the notifications and stuff gone out. We've got about 200 in here so far, so it looks like everybody's coming in. So I'm just going to get started this week because we've got so much to cover. I'm just going to pop over here and let's just kick off right now. So questions and answers. We're going to have 2 segments for questions and answers. So at the end of this segment, I'm going to take a few questions. So just kind of get them ready. If you have pressing questions as you have them, just pop those up. And Bruce is in the house. Bruce will let me know about those questions. But then at the end of the segment, feel free to ask some other questions and I'll be kind of looking at monitoring those. And then at the end, we'll also be doing question and answers after we sign off. Then we hang out and we just do Q&A, maybe stuff that's off topic. You want to ask anything you want about Photoshop or whatever. It's kind of an AMA session. All right, guys. So enough of me. Let's get started with Photoshop. So we're talking about gradients. Now what we're going to be doing today is going to be applicable for both photographers and designers. Now something really big happened in Photoshop 2020. A lot of you are aware of it. The gradients panel appeared. Now, if you don't have the gradients panel or you're not in 2020, and let me know in the chat too what version you guys are on. It should be 2021 or probably CS6 are the other options. So if you go under Window and we go to Gradient, this is where you get the Gradients panel. And then, of course, we have the Gradient tool on the left-hand side here on the toolbar. So these are the places we're going to go and do things with gradients. But there's so much more we can do than people realize. And if yours looks a little bit different here, you can go in here and see what I've got. Small list, large list. So we can do the list version. And when we pop them open, you can see that. Or one of the ways I like to work is a thumbnail view. So we can do a small thumbnail. And if you want, which I really don't do very much, is the large thumbnail. And this gives us these huge gradients, which are great if you're on a 4K monitor. But for our case, I can see pretty well with these small ones. Before we continue, let me just mention, I've got all these extra gradients under the legacy gradients. And if you watched my tutorial this week on gradient maps, you'd see that. But we're going way beyond what we did on that, so just so you know. But one of the useful ones is color toning, photographic toning here. These are really useful. Now, if you just loaded up Photoshop and you haven't done what I'm about to show you, you won't see those. So what you want to do is go to the menu on the side and you'll see an option that says Legacy Gradients. If you click on that Legacy Gradients, it will load in all these gradient libraries that come with Photoshop. So what you want to do is, inside these, they put them into groups. And this was a newer addition. Now here's a little tip. If you want to open all of these and just look at the thumbnails, hold down the Command key on Mac, that would be Control on Windows, and click the arrow. And this will reveal all of them. So you can pop these open and, you can open them like this if you want, or however you want. And you'll notice as you scroll, all of them will be revealed, except for the legacy gradient. You just hit the Control Command again under that subset, and then you can do that. So what it'll do is it'll open the top level, and notice you can have groups under groups. So if you didn't want these default gradients there, you could drag them up and put them into their own group, so they're not in that subgroup. But I'm not going to do that. And then go down, there's that photographic toning. So you can see that's how we can get extra gradients. Now, if you were not on Photoshop 2020, the way you would access gradients is, you could go through here and grab your gradient editor. And all you got to do is choose the gradient tool, and this will become active. And then click on the side here, and then you'll have the option here to get your other gradients in. But you are going to have, you just append default gradients. And that's where you can get the photographic toning and some of those other ones there. All right, so now that we make sure that everybody's got those, let me just make sure that my chat is right up to date. There we go. Good, so I'm not missing anything. And let me go back to Photoshop. Something weird just happened there when I was, hang on a sec. Let's get Photoshop back front and center. All right, great. Okay, so now we've just kind of established that this is where the gradients are. In a second, we're going to look at creating custom gradients as well. But first of all, I want to show you just a couple of quick things we can do with gradients before we dig in a little bit deeper. So we can apply, with a photograph, or it could be a background, if you're doing a design, could be a text. In fact, I'll do some text here so I can show you this as well. This is text. Just so we can just get this set up, and I'll show you lots of ways of doing this. So let's get that open. This is test. Test is fine. Good enough. All right. So what we want to do is, if you are on, and let me see, everybody's 72, 72, 68. Wow, we've got some interesting numbers here. 59. I'm 43. How old is everyone? Oh, everybody's giving their ages. Okay, great. That's good. So I was thinking like versions of Photoshop. And Lee is 22.1.1. And some of these are versions and some of these are ages. That's actually pretty funny. All right. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down under the adjustment layers. And you're going to grab this little yin-yang thing. And you'll see gradient at the top. And you'll see gradient map further down. Let's just start with gradient. So it doesn't matter what version of Photoshop you're on, you're going to have this option. So you're going to see the gradient fill is now going to appear. So this is on the new version and the old version. And if you go in here, you'll see all the gradients that are available. So let's just apply this gradient. This is one of the color tone ones. And notice this is where we get to adjusting. So if we want to change the angle, we can do that. If we want to change the type of gradient, we can change that. See that? Reflected, diamond. So these different ones work very well. Reflected is actually kind of an interesting one too. So you can put color into the top and bottom of the image. Or of course, if you flip it around, reverse it, then you're going to have it just color in the middle, a colored strip. So you can do different things with this. Now let me show you how to make this useful. What we want to do now is we want to change this so we can see the image underneath. If you're creating a base, you don't have to do that. But if we go under normal, I'm going to show you several ways of doing it. One is to use color. And notice when we do the color here, we can see there's that strip of color, black and white on the top. Might be useful, but maybe a more useful way of doing that is to reduce the opacity and just bring it in a little bit. So now what it's doing is it's reducing the color on the top and bottom, adding a strip of color in the middle. Now, if we choose the gradient, double click that or bring up the options, and we can resize this strip in the middle by changing the scale. See, as we scale that up, that strip becomes bigger. And if we make it smaller, it can become a very, very thin strip. See that? So this gives you a way to do this. Let's get it where it's just blending off the edges. There we go. So we can see, and let me turn it up more so you can get a better idea. So see how it's just kind of fading at the top and bottom. So those are useful ways of just using a gradient overlay. Now, here's where things get a little bit different when we're working inside of Photoshop 2021 or 2020. If you want to change this gradient, all you need to do is just double click and change it on any version. See that? How we just choose a different gradient. Now, with the gradients panel, we can do this completely different. So I can take this gradient and just drop it on top of the photo. And notice what it did is if I double click, it just changed it. So if I want to use a different gradient, I can just drag it onto the photo. See what I'm doing there? Just simply drag it on there and it will change out the gradient that's being viewed in that gradient panel. You know, I can also, actually, I can drag it into the layers panel as well. So if you're scrolling through and you see a layer and you see a gradient, you're like, I want to try this, you can drag it into there. Or, of course, you could drag it into the image, and that will enable you to do it. The nice thing about this is if I don't have a gradient selected and I want to create a gradient layer, I just drag it onto the image, and look, it creates that gradient layer automatically. Notice that that's sitting above the image. I can drag it above everything. Once again, we can go into that color blend mode. But there's other blend modes that work nicely too. You know, we can use the screen blend mode, works really nice. Let's bring this down so we can just kind of blend it in a little bit. Screen works good. Overlay, soft light. I know a lot of people like to use it in the soft light mode. And see if I turn up the opacity. So if you're not playing around with the opacity, some of these other blend modes are going to work well. Soft light, overlay, and it's going to give you the color. If you want to do an overall color tone and you want to adjust it with opacity, just go to color, which replaces all the color in the image, and then adjusting the opacity lets you blend in the original colors with the colors of the gradient. All right, so that's kind of using a gradient overlay. Now, if I wanted to do this on the text, it's quite simple. See how we've got the text sitting there on its own layer, which is directly above the image. When you have an adjustment layer, it affects everything underneath it. If you want to affect just the layer underneath and not the whole image, go in between, hold down the Alt or the Option key, you'll see this little arrow will appear. And this is for creating a clipping mask, clip. And now it's just applying to the text. You can't see it because we're in color mode, but let's go to normal mode. turn the opacity up, and look at that. And of course, if you want to change it, just drag in different colors. And of course, it doesn't look like much of a gradient, and that comes down to, once again, the scale. So let's make the scale smaller. And notice you can't see it, and that's because it splits probably in the middle of the page. Here's a little trick with the gradient. If I click and drag on the image, notice this, I can drag this gradient up or down interactively. And then let's increase the scale a little bit. Get a nice, there we go, nice little gradient there. And if it's hard to get it, you can type in a number. Let's do 2. And see how we can create that 3, 4, and we can start to create that gradient exactly how we want it. Now you can't drag now. You have to double click, bring up gradient fill, and then when you do that, now you can drag. And this gives you a lot of control. You can also change the angle. So if I change the angle here, see how I can make it go, I'll hold down the shift key here, so now just half of it can go across like that. And if someone's going to ask, can you animate that? Yes, you probably can. Because usually someone's going to ask me that question. All right. Now, the other thing that we can do is, if I hold down the Alt or the Option key, notice cancel hits a reset. That goes back to how it was. And once again, if we want to reverse it, just hit reverse, and that'll flip it upside down. So now it just reverses the direction of that gradient. And if we're doing it at an angle, of course, it'll do the same thing, hitting that reverse. So it just flips it. All right. So we're getting through lots and lots of information. Almost 300 people here now. Good to see you guys that just joined us. We are doing a gradients masterclass right now, and so we're going to be doing more things on gradients, and then we're going to be doing my Fix My Photo in a little bit, where I work on your photos. And if you just joined and you missed a little bit, it's okay. You're going to be able to follow along because this is broken into little segments. And if you want to see the replay, because everybody always asks, that will be available there on YouTube in about 10-15 minutes afterwards. The review will be, the replay will be live. And by the way, guys, do me a favor, if you're getting any value out of this at all, hit that like button. This helps us with the algorithm. And we're going to go back into the lesson, but if you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button. And then that way, when we're doing these live, you'll get the notification. And also, one last thing, if you go on photoshopcafe.com and sign up for the newsletter, then you'll get the email that lets you know when we're going live, because YouTube doesn't send out those emails anymore. All right, moving on. Gradients. So we're looking at the gradients on the text here. And of course, if we wanted to affect everything underneath, hold down the Alt or the Option key, go between it. Now it affects the entire image. Let's go back to our color blend mode and see we get an interesting kind of a duotone effect. Let me double click on here. And if I want to have a hard line in here, I can just drag that scale to 0. Let me just set that scale to 0. And it'll go to 1, but that gives it's going to give us a hard line. See that? And now we can drag, of course. So you want to change it, no problem. And now you can really see where the angle's kind of working here. Now the thing about the angle is it's not going to appear until you let go, so it's not real time. But you can type in the angle, so if you want 90 degrees, just pop that in there, drag it down, so you wanted to do some kind of a, just kind of an interesting effect like that, you could do that. Now, what if you wanted to put another color in here? So if I wanted to replace the same one, all I would do is I would just use reflected, and I'll just make this a little bit bigger. I'll show you how I would do this. I would make it a little bit bigger there on the scale, and then let's just reverse it and drag and see what we're doing here. Let me bring that scale back down again. And that way we can kind of have that color on the top of the bottom. But if you wanted a hard edge and you wanted to create those lines, what would you do? Well, let's reverse it back. Let's go back to our hard edge. And you can see there that that's set very small. Let's go out of our reflective back to our linear and bring it down. So we want this purple at the top. So what you're going to do to edit the gradient is you click on the gradient swatch right there, and this brings up the gradient editor. And we're going to look at the gradient editor now. So I want to add another purple one here. So this is one side, obviously this is the other side of the gradient. As I drag this across, it changes the gradient. Now I'm going to put this in the middle. Now I want to duplicate this. Now there's two ways I could do that. I could either click and then click again, and that will bring up my color swatch here, and then just select in there, and I could choose the color that way. And you can see it's pretty good, sort of getting there, right? And I want those hard edges. Let me just drag that out. Let me show you another way. If you hold down the Alt or the Option key and drag, you drag out a duplicate of that gradient. See that? So that stop, we've made a copy of that stop. And whoops, just not drag it off. And you can drag it across here and do that. And these little ones here, so what I'm doing there is I'm just bringing those across. So we can kind of set our locations. And if I want to make a hard edge, I just drag that purple one in. Now I'm not sure I like that purple one. I just drag away to get rid of it. And if I wanted to duplicate this purple, let's just go in here. I'll hold down the Alt or the Option key. Let's do that right now. Making another copy of it. Whoops. Gotta be a little careful. It's a little tricky. Make sure I'm over there when I let go so I don't lose it. Oh, I'm losing it. Hang on. Let's get that. Let me drag it next to it. What am I doing here? Oh, I think I'm just making lots and lots of them. There we go. I'm making lots of them. Okay, so let's drag it across there. Let's get rid of that orange. And yeah, I just made a whole ton of those. So when you Alt or Option, let me just drag these away to get rid of them. So we got too many of those. Let's bring the orange one over here. Put it up against the edge, and see what we're doing is we're creating this gradient. And now all we need to do now is just change the scale a bit. And we drag it up and see what we're doing there. And so, you know, if you want a hard edge, let me click on here. You just bring these stops very close together. See, that gives us a hard edge there. Bring those stops together, gives us a hard edge at the top. So this gives you the option. And of course, if you wanted to put another stripe in the middle, you could click in there and create another color. So let's do blue just for fun. And see how it's a smooth gradient? And that smoothness is the distance between the two stops. Now this is the midpoint. If I move this more towards one side, notice how it brings the midpoint down. If we go to the other side, it brings it up. So if we do that and click on here, we see the other midpoint. Let's bring it in closer. And now we're creating a narrow band here of the blue. But notice the gradient's still there. If you wanted to make that super hard, Option drag on the orange. Gets tricky once again, like I said. Option drag, that creates another orange one. Let's create another one. Awesome. And now we can just bring those in right up against the blue, and this enables us to create those hard edges. All right, so that's basically how we do that, and then you just click New, and by doing that, we add that gradient so we can reuse it. So that gradient is now going to be added into our library, and that's by hitting New. So if you want to reuse that gradient, hit that New, and it will create that gradient preset that you can use over and over again. All right, so let's continue. Let me get rid of these. And we're going to do gradient maps in a second too. Now, there's another way to use gradients, and it's quite simple. All we need to do is set the foreground and background color, and we're going to use the gradient tool. So say I wanted to create, I don't know, a red. So I'm going to choose red here, and then we're going to grab yellow as the background. So we're going to choose a red to yellow color. Great, so we've set our foreground, background color, and now we're going to grab the gradient tool. Now notice it's still got the last selected gradient. If we click on the gradient options, we scroll up to the top, and notice we've got the basics, and that's black to white, foreground to background, and foreground to transparent. So let's grab our foreground to background, and notice this is red to yellow. If I go in here and I change any colors, it's going to change the gradient. Look, see that? Now it's a lime green to yellow. So whatever we select here is going to be selected in that gradient. Now there's 4 different shapes. Linear is the one you're going to use most of the time. And how this works is we're going to create a new layer, and then you're going to drag. So wherever you start dragging from, so say I drag beneath the text, there's going to be no gradient. It's going to be a solid color above where I'm dragging because I'm dragging down. See that blue point that's been added? Everything above that is going to be a solid red, unless I have reverse on. See the reverse? Then it would be a yellow. Now I'm going to bring it down, and wherever I stop is where that gradient's going to go. And at the end of that, on the outside of that, is also going to be a solid color. So let me release it. Notice there's solid red, solid yellow, and then the gradient is between the 2 points I dragged. If I want a more abrupt color, start and drag in a very short distance and see what's happening. If you want more of a linear gradient, very smooth, gradual gradient, click and drag. Let me zoom out. And here's the thing, you can also start off the canvas and you can drag. So if you want a very subtle gradient in the middle, drag outside of that and notice we just get a very nice soft gradient. And this is nice if you're creating things like backgrounds for slides and different things like that. Also, it can look really nice over our photos. So let's go back to our color. And we're going to bring our opacity down and see how we've got this very gradual gradient that just kind of warms our photo. It's a little bit more interesting than just using the photo filter, because there are photo filters in Photoshop that warm or cool, but adding the gradient just gives a little something extra. And I'll be honest with you, I would probably flip this. And why don't we do that? And the reason I do that is I probably want the yellows near the top. There we go. And the reason I would do that is because, the sunlight. The sunlight is coming from the top. The light is coming from the top, would be where more of the warmer colors are going to come. Let me show you another tip. And we'll do this right before we go into looking at gradient maps as well. So let me show you something. What happens when you get a gradient that's not smooth? So I'm going to create a red to blue gradient. And sometimes you get that gradient and you're going to see banding in there. Maybe not so much there. Let's try a different color here. Maybe a yellow to blue. Let's try a different one. See if we can create a nice banding effect. Maybe that one will do it. And sometimes you get in here, yeah, see now you can see the banding, see how it's not even? And what you need to do to even this out is really simple. And you'll notice this more, in certain things when you start doing it. See, there's a diagonal line going there, and it's kind of splotchy. So here's the trick. If you choose Filter, Noise, Add Noise, just give it a little bit of noise. You want to make sure you're monochromatic. And what we can do here is I'm just going to take that amount of noise down a little bit. And then what that does is it just adds a little bit of grain in there. See that? And then if we choose Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur or Gaussian Blur, and you blur this, notice, look at that. And now we have a super, super smooth gradient. So that's like one of the tricks from way back in the day. I learned that one many years ago with print design, where we were struggling to get those beautiful smooth gradients. So that's a little trick. And of course, once again, I can put this into soft light or whatever, apply it to the picture, and you've got a mega smooth with no banding. So that's kind of how you get rid of that. Now, when you're working on the images, there's also other ways that we can apply our gradient. Let's just quickly do that. I'm just going to go into the yellow. Let's do a yellow to red so we get a kind of let's go slightly orangey red. There we go. And this is just going to give us an interesting look. So if I go across there, what we're in right now is we're just in soft light mode, and I'm just applying this. So we go from the top to the bottom. It's nice. See how that yellow is mixing with the foliage in the background, create a little bit of green. So we can do that. But now there's different ways we can do it. Another one that works sometimes is the radial gradient. And what that does is that puts the color in the middle and spreads it out. Let me go to normal mode so you can see. That's what that gradient does. So just wherever you drag is going to create that circle. See that? So if we start in the middle to go out. Great way of creating things like vignettes. And for example, if I was to use this now and go from there to transparent, let me just delete everything first, and I'm going to drag there, create a new layer, and when I go there, see, we just get that in the middle. But if I was to reverse this and drag this out, See, now we get a little color vignette around the edges, which is something I know you guys are going to be able to use. And you can put that into color, soft light, whatever you want. And then it just adds that little vignette color. Now, of course, if you chose black as the foreground color, you'd just do a standard vignette. See that? We're just creating that vignette right now. As you can see there, put that into normal blending mode. That's a vignette. Of course, we see, you know, some of the other color there because we applied that yellow before, but let's just use the black now. There we go. Simple vignette, just like that. So that's another thing we can do, and that's using the radial. There's another one here, which is kind of more of a, you know, if you're trying to create a radar screen or a clock kind of thing. And that's the, what do they call that one? I never use it. Angle gradient. You know, so if you wanted to apply it, let me go foreground and background. This will work much better so you guys can see. And so, you know, if you wanted to do that and then wrap it down into a cone or something like that, you could. So, you know, but that could be interesting if you go into the corner here and apply it that way. See how it kind of fans out? Or if you go this way, you get a hard line. So, you know, it's go that way. It's entirely up to you guys how you would want to use that. So it has its uses, but it's not one I use much. Reflected, we already covered that. So basically what it does is it creates our strip in the middle. And this is good when you're doing things like metallics, different things like that. It's a nice way to create a metallic look. And then, of course, the last one here that we're doing is the diamond one. And this is interesting. This one's useful for photography or overlays. So let's do yellow. Create a nice yellow, and let's do a yellow to orange again. And we could create this overlay. Make sure we go to the foreground to background. Dragging this out. And yeah, I'm going to reverse this. So let's just reverse it. There we go. And let's make that bigger. So see how this creates a nice kind of light effect? And if we put this into color blend mode, you can kind of see it. But this might look better, you know, it's something like something with a horizon. So let's go into our libraries here and let's just grab a photo. So I hope you guys are getting some value out of this. If you just joined us, resetting, you know, just quickly, welcome. We're doing live from lockdown, so this is live. We're doing a gradients masterclass right now. You can watch the replay. It's going to be live, you know, 10-15 minutes after it'll be there on YouTube. And so you guys can watch it. And a day or two later, I will actually embed it on photoshopcafe.com. So if you want to see it. And we'll go through different things that we can do with gradients. So you haven't missed anything. You can watch the replay. Of course, it's better to be here live if you can. And let's do something like this. And also, guys, hit that like button if you don't mind. It helps us with the algorithm just to let people know that we are live here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the diamond one. We're going to create a new layer. And let's just drag it off there into that area here. And let's put this into, I don't know, like a screen or an overlay. Let's do a screen. And with the screen mode, I'm going to drag this down. See, it gives us that beautiful haze. See that? And you can see the kind of colors going there now. Like, you know, it's a different time of the day. Here it is, kind of cold, middle of the afternoon. Now we're getting to a nice time of the day. And we can do this, you know, just using the gradient here. And that's using that diamond gradient. One of the other things I like to do a lot, let me just create the new layer here, is to create, you know, where it looks like a lens flare or the sun flare, you know, when the sun's going down, golden hour kind of thing. And I've got lots and lots of tutorials on that and other places. But let me just show you how I would do that right now. So we've got the foreground set to a yellow. Let's make it more of an orange. And by the way, I just clicked on the color swatch to bring up the, to change the color there. So you just click on that foreground box. Great. And we're going to set this to a linear. And then we're going to go under our gradients at the top. And I'm going to choose the foreground to transparent. You'll see it under the basics. And the reason it's not in the basics is because I use these three gradients all the time. And I don't want to have to dig around. So let me give you another tip. So these gradients, if I held down the shift key, I can select them all and you can drag them. So let me drag those up into basics. There we go. So this is what you might see. And the way Photoshop always was is we always had these at the top. and I like them at the top. So I hit the shift key, drag it up till you see that single blue line, release it, and now it doesn't matter if I open or close that because it's up there all the time, and I don't see why it shouldn't be there because those are the ones you use the most. All right, great. So now we're going foreground to transparent. We're going to go back to linear, make sure your blend mode's set to normal. Of course, you can set the blend modes here if you want to get those blend modes on the gradient. So if I chose overlay, for example, and then I drag it and I want to get an overlay gradient, I can do that automatically. But the problem here is I go back to normal. Notice it's not going to change that blend mode. So it only uses it once you apply it. So rather than doing that, which just seems counterintuitive, if you want to do that, that's great. But a better way of doing it is just keep it in normal mode, drag this out to get our light coming down, and then change the blend mode in the layers panel. So now if we go to overlay and say, hey, we like that, but I want to change it to soft light, I can. And the other nice thing about applying the blend modes on the layer and not up here, same with the brushes. I very rarely use the color modes on brushes or gradients because I can put them on a layer and I can roll over. As I roll over, I can see how it's going to affect it, and it gives me so much more control. Now I'm going to choose this hard light if I want to get that flare. See how you get that flare? And then of course, if you want to get the light leak effect, you can also do that, just kind of using the same kind of things. Let me flip that around a little bit and maybe get a little bit there. You get the idea, and you start to get those light leaks, like you would get on the vintage photos. And if you wanted to mess these up a little bit, because see they're kind of very linear right now, you could go into gradient, into filters, and just go into filters and just use distort filters. I don't know. Let's use something in here. Distort. Let's do something like I don't know. Let's do a twirl, just for fun. All right, let's apply that. Click OK. And, maybe I didn't do it enough, but see how it's just getting that away from being just that perfect linear. Let's do that again. I definitely didn't do it enough. We could do ripples and shears too. There's so many different ways of doing this. Let's do large. And see how it just kind of breaks it up there. And then if you wanted to add a blur, you could blur it, do a motion blur. I'm just showing you some different things that you could do to kind of break these up a little bit so they don't look, so much like they're applied for gradients. You can get them a little more random. You could even go into liquify if you wanted, just to make these look more like random light leaks. Notice that this is absolutely huge. Let's go down here, fit the screen. There we go. And I can make this really big and just drag these areas out. Not even worried, what I'm doing. I'll probably even go bigger. And I'm just dragging these around just randomly. Click OK. Now add a filter blur. Add a Gaussian blur. Let's add a big blur. And now look at that. Now it looks more like a light leak that you would get from an old Instamatic kind of camera. And of course, you could also see how this looks with different blend modes. Maybe the overlay mode looks better. This is like the Holga effect, so to speak. If you guys have ever used those cameras or are familiar with them, yeah, some of these different ones look kind of interesting. Even that, the pen light looks interesting. Drop the opacity down. And, these were cheap cameras, film cameras that the edges weren't sealed, usually made in Russia. There's a whole, community around the whole thing with these Holga cameras and stuff. And the light leaks. All right, so I hope you guys are enjoying that. Okay, let's go to something else that we can do right now, which is going to be using the gradient maps. Now, this is an incredible way of colorizing images. If you want to get a super fast, fashion kind of a look, it's good for that. And of course, it gives you a cinematic look. It can pretty much, do a lot of things. Let's just grab this photo here, because I guess this sort of looks fashiony. It's just from Adobe stock. I'm just kind of grabbing it. And although I wouldn't imagine the dress would probably be more appropriate in the Hawaii or somewhere, maybe not with the cold mountains in the background, but that's fine. All right, so why don't we go ahead and we're going to do the gradient map. So in order to create a gradient map, it just works the same way as gradients do. And we're going to do that. And by the way, if you guys just joining us, welcome. We're doing Gradients Masterclass We've just shown you guys how to use gradients and a ton of different things you can do with them. The replay will be live on YouTube, like 10-15 minutes afterwards. And now we're going to go into gradient maps. So for those of you who've been with us the whole time, just doing that little restarter for everybody. And also, don't be shy. Join in the room there in the chat. There's good people in there just waiting to meet you and make fun of you in a good way. I'm kidding. They don't make fun of anyone, just me. Bruce makes fun of me, and I make fun of Bruce. Everyone else is nice. All right, so what we're going to do now is instead of choosing a gradient, we're going to choose the gradient map. And also, once again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is YouTube, and it's hard to get the good stuff to rise to the top. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. All right, so with the gradient map, this works differently than a gradient. What we saw about a gradient is when we apply it, it goes, in the direction that we apply that gradient. A gradient map works on the underlying tones of the image. If we look at something like Control L for levels or Control M for curves, that control command, I just want to show you something. If you look at the levels here, they match this. So if you see black on the left, white on the right, you see red and yellow. So rather than going black to white, what it's doing is it's mapping, and that's why it's called a gradient map. It's mapping to the tones. So the black tones are going to get red. The dark tones, the darker they are, the more they are to the left, the more red, or the more of that color. The secondary color, or the color on the right-hand side, is yellow. And that maps to white. So imagine black to white across there. And so the lighter the image, or the lighter the tones in the image, the more of that color they're going to get. So in this case, we can see that we've got that. Let me go to black and white so you can just see. So this will convert this image to a black and white. And the reason it's doing it is because the blacks map to the darker tones, the white maps to the lighter tones. Just to prove it, I'm going to hit reverse. Now the whites are mapping to the darker tones and the blacks are mapping to the lighter tones. So it's always a black to white mapping no matter what color gradient is on the top. That gradient is going to fit those tones in the image, and of course it's a great way to get a negative. All right, so let's continue. So we can do different things with this. So we've seen, that's basically how it works. Now if I go into the blues here and I choose, there's a dark to light blue. Notice that there's different blues here. So now the dark blues are mapping to the dark tones, and the more of the blues are mapping to the light tones. The mid-tones, are getting the lighter blues. They can be reversed. Gives a kind of solarized look. If you're going for special effects or something, you might use it, but, let's try some of these other colors like this. You're trying to get a solarization, or, people trying to get that gold. They want to make things look like they're made out of gold. Essentially, that's how they do it. They just go in here, and then they just apply the gradients in the gradient map. When you get that fake gold, you've seen it everywhere. I've never done a tutorial on it. Probably should at some point. Do my version of, how to fake gold and, but essentially that's all they're doing. They're just applying a gradient map over the top of this, and that does it. Now let's go a more practical way of using these gradient maps. A way I like to use them is exactly the same way we were using the gradients, and that's to use the layer blending modes. So if we go under here, my favorite one is color. This is my go-to, because what this does is it doesn't affect the luminosity, the lightness or darkness of the image. All it changes is the color and nothing else. And this way I can blend in the color and just apply a little bit of that color that I want in here. And obviously, it's got this purple foreground. Looks kind of interesting, very alien. We'll do more practical colors in a sec, but you can kind of see how this is working. So this is a great way of doing it. Now, of course, we can use screen mode, and notice this also changes the luminosity. So the lighter colors lighten the image, the darker colors darken the image. But if you're happy with your tones and your exposure, and you just want to affect the color, go into color mode, and look at this. It gives it a rich kind of a look. Now, of course, you can also go into multiply, and that will darken it. Just play around with the different blend modes and see what you like. Usually I'm using, color most of the time, occasionally soft light if I'm going for a different look. So now let's use a more useful gradient map. The nice thing about this, I don't want to click up here right now, because if I do, I'm going to be, well, actually, I guess I can. Yeah, I can click up here because I've got the gradient map selected. What you don't want to do is have the gradient layer and then go and choose a gradient, because then it's not going to change the gradient map. As long as you're in the gradient map in the properties panel, don't go into the gradients panel. Go into the properties panel. Let me show you. If I hit the gradients panel, notice what it does is it creates a gradient overlay, which looks nice. Actually looks really nice. But a better way of doing it is, if you want that gradient, make sure you're in the properties panel. Then you can go up and you can choose, the different colors that you want, and click in here, and it will map it rather than just overlaying it. All right, so let's look at some, we've got different tones we can go in here. We've got warm tones. We can do grays if you want to make it look a little bit more. I kind of like this, desaturate, more like what you would see on movies or TV. You can get this kind of slightly desaturated look. And applying a gradient map is a nicer way of doing it, other than just taking hue saturation and reducing the saturation. Let's see if you can see the difference. Let's go in here. So there is the gradient map. And if we go under here and we create a hue saturation adjustment and reduce the saturation a little bit, let's make sure we're not clipping it. Turn that off. There we go. You might be hard pressed to see a big difference, but let's look at there and there. See how it's just a little richer the way it's being applied. And of course, you can do them both together. So let's go back to the gradient map. And a really great way, this is magic. When we go down here and we choose these legacy gradients, and by the way, if you don't know where they are, gradients panel, click on here, choose legacy gradients. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, just recapping, hit the gradient, go up the top here, hit that little gear, and then you're going to see a pan default gradients if you just joined us. All right, moving on. So let's go down here, and we want to go down to the color toning, photographic toning. And these are designed after different film. So notice what happens as I click on these. We just get these beautiful looks here with the gradients. And if you want more information on those, check out the tutorial I dropped this Tuesday on the gradients, right there on YouTube. This is definitely going way more in depth into gradients and just showing you guys a ton of things. So what we're going to do right now is, we've been having a lot of fun with the gradients. I'm going to take, questions and answers. If you've got questions and stuff like that, get those ready. And right now, though, what we're going to do is we are going to flip through, and it's time to fix my photo. And hello once again. This is if I actually went anywhere. I'm actually still here. But we're just coming to another segment, which is a favorite from the Cafe crew, and that is Fix My Photo. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply some of the things we've learned today, but also we're going to do some other things where we're just going to go random, where I go to the photos that you guys have submitted, and then we're going to fix them, we're going to enhance them, we're going to do different things with your guys' photos. So this is like a real-time challenge, and it's always fun to see what happens out of this. Now, thank you for the people that have submitted their photos this week. It was quite a few. And if you guys want to be included in Fix My Photo, we can get your photos in here, and you can see right there on the screen. Submit them to fixmyphoto.net. And I prefer if you upload a RAW file. It can be a JPEG. If you don't have a RAW file, JPEG or TIFF, as large as you can get them. And I prefer them unedited, because if you run Topaz or sharpening and all that stuff, it's really hard for me to do anything with them because they're already processed. Sometimes people do a processed version and an unprocessed version, so maybe they can compare, what they did versus what I'm doing, and that's fine if you want to do that. Very important, make sure you put your name in the file name so I know you uploaded the photo and I can give you a credit and a shout out. And and of course you're giving me permission to use your photo here, and also maybe if I might do one on one of our regular free tutorials on YouTube as well. Generally speaking, if I use your photos for another tutorial outside of Lightroom Lockdown, I'll contact you and ask for permission if I can get a hold of you. Maximum 3 submissions per person per week. So, you can submit 3 every week. That's you, Tony Mule, and others I know submit 3 every week. And thank you for that. So why don't we just jump in right now and see what we're going to do. The first Fix My Photo is going to be this beautiful photo from Donna Milton. Donna Milton, are you in the house? Say hello if you're here. If you are, it's great to have you. If not, and you're watching the replay, well, we picked your photos this week. So let me just tell you a quick thing about what I'm doing here. You see we're in Lightroom. I could do this from Lightroom Classic, or I could do it from Bridge. It doesn't matter where you open the images. The develop module inside of Lightroom is identical to the camera raw adjustments inside of Photoshop. But I'm just going to use Lightroom just for managing these photos, and we'll do our adjustments inside of Photoshop. Now I'm going to tell you why I'm doing it. Let me show you something pretty cool. So I'm in here in Lightroom, and this is a bonus tip just for you guys. What I'm doing is I set up a watch folder. And what I did with this watch folder is... let me see where I can't even remember where I set this up. We have this under import, auto import. Here we go, auto import. And then I hit the auto import settings. So what I did is I chose a photo. So you guys are uploading your images to Dropbox. And then I have Dropbox on my desktop. And then it points there to that Fix My Photo folder on Dropbox, which syncs. And then I enable auto import. And all I need to do is when I launch a Lightroom, let me hit G for grid, it automatically, this is the photos you guys submitted this week. When I launch Lightroom, it automatically brings the photos in from Dropbox. So I don't even have to, go into Dropbox each week. I just open this up and it brings it in. And it was 29 were brought in this week. So you guys, these are the 29 photos you guys submitted. So it's just a nice, quick and easy way to manage these. I guess it's not 29 because I was playing around with those. All right, so why don't we start with this beautiful photo here, and I'm going to open in Photoshop. So I'm going to choose right-click, edit into Photoshop 2021, and I'm going to edit the original. Now, if you were doing this from Photoshop and you were doing this in Bridge, you'd open it the same way. So what we're going to do on this photo here is we're going to apply a nice background blur. So we've got a little bit of background here. You notice that the background's a little bit out of focus. So she's shooting here at a, let's find out. I'm going to guess a 5.6 or something like that, but let's see where we're at for the, let's look at our metadata here and see what she shot this at. Where are we? Metadata. Is that in there? EXIF data. Where is our EXIF data? Quick develop. And I select that image. Yeah, it's not showing it in here. Normally it would show, so I guess this was exported. Oh, she created a JPEG. That's why. Okay, so if it was the raw file, it would show in there. But yeah, okay, so I'm going to guess it's about maybe a 5.6. So we want to make this look, or she was closer for wider angle lens. That would also give us a little bit of a black background blue, but we want more. Okay, so here's what I'm going to show you, a couple of things. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you were under the AI, and this is just fun, so let's just choose the windows here. We're going to choose our filters, and we've got this neural filter gallery. It does some interesting things with the background. So if I click under here, and these are available, I can choose depth aware, turn that on, and we can see what we can do here is we can apply haze on the background. See that? So automatically add that haze to the background. It's not giving us a blur. Hopefully that will come soon, but we can also change the color temperature. We can warm up that background, see that? Or we can cool it down. Right there. So the AI is doing this for us, and the brightness. Now the AI is working pretty good, but let me make it real dark so you can see, it's kind of hazy around the edges and it's kind of getting the ears and things like that. So that's definitely coming. But let's look at what we want to do is select the two boys here. So we can go down and we can use the object selection or quick selection tool. Either one of these will do the same thing. And you're going to see an object that says select subject. This uses the AI to make a selection, and it recognizes, hey, there's two people here, and I want to copy this to a new layer. Control J, Command J, will jump that to a new layer. Now, I'm going to show you a rookie mistake that a lot of people do. They go to blur the background. So we can choose filter blur. I'll just use a Gaussian blur. And this is, I mean, I did this all the time myself. And see how you get this nice blur. The background looks good, right? But there's a giveaway. See that dark halo? And see that light halo? Why are they there? Well, if you hide the layer you copied, you blurred these, and what it did is it expanded these, so you're seeing the blurring of the subjects. We don't want that. So I'm going to show you a little trick. Hit Control or Command and click on the top layer. Now we're selecting our boys, and now we're going to hide them. Let me just undo this a couple of times. I want to revert that, make sure we've got the unblurred version. Control click, let's hide it so you can see what's going on. Now we're on the background. Now I want to expand this a little, just a little, so we go over so we're not having those edges exposed. So let's choose Select. Everything to do with selections is under the Select menu. And then we're going to choose Modify, and we're going to expand this. All right, so we're expanding it. Let's do about, I don't know, 5 pixels. And let's click OK. And this looks good. So I'm just kind of examining this, making sure that this selection is outside of their bounds. You can see a little edge there. That's perfect. That's what we want. Now what I want to do is just fill them randomly. So I'm going to hit Shift Backspace. So the first thing we did is we made a selection. Then we expanded that selection, and now we're going to fill it with content aware. So you can go under Edit Fill, or I like to use Shift Backspace, which would be Shift Delete on Windows. Brings up the Fill dialog box. Under Contents, choose Content Aware, click OK, and it's going to apply Content Aware Fill, and Control D, Invisible Man, awesome. Now it doesn't matter what this looks like because we're not going to see this area, we're just going to see the edges. This is close enough. This is actually probably going to work fine. Let me show you the boys. Go down there, and if you had a problem with those edges, you could fill those separately, or you could apply it again. But let's see how we go. Choose Filter Blur, Gaussian Blur. Yep, look at that. Now we get the nice background blur without the halos on those edges. See that? Gives us a nice clean background. Now notice it's not a perfect selection, but you know, this is just for a tutorial. What I would have done when I selected this area, when I selected them, you just go into Select and Mask, and then you would just go around those edges, hit Refine here, and play around. But that's not what we're focusing on this week. So you could do a better selection, but this is definitely a better background blur, I believe, than before. So that's more believable. All right, awesome. Let's jump in here and see what else we've got in Lightroom. And we've got questions coming up, guys, in about 5 minutes. We're going to wrap up this segment, and then we're going to do Q&A. All right, let's do our buddy Tony Mule. Are you in the house, Tony? Say hello, and good to see you, Russ. And, okay, so Tony, this is the after, and here's the before. Now, I believe you're using Topaz. It looks to me like Topaz you're using there. And this is definitely a style that you like, and that's great. One thing I would just be a little bit careful about, Tony, is just watch these areas here. Your leaves here. Just watch that, because you see these areas of fine detail, you get the white halos around there when you apply the sharpening or the Topaz a little much, and sometimes what you're getting is sizzling. I call it sizzling. I don't know. There's probably another name for it, but I call it sizzling around these edges, and this is the cafe name from now on. We'll just call it sizzling. Unless someone's got a real name. Give me the real name, and we'll use it. But see how they're sizzling around there, and then you're losing your color. You're getting your white in there, and so you're losing some of your details. So be careful. Just be a little bit careful with that, Tony. With your images, I see that in a lot of your images. And once again, if that's an effect or something you're going for, go for it. Knock yourself out. But a way that you might get over that is if you apply these. Let me just go back to your image and just give you a little tip here. When you apply this, make a copy of that image over that layer, and then apply your filter, and then make sure you have a layer or a copy of it on a layer above, which is unaffected, and then change that to color blending mode. And if you put that in color blending mode, these areas of white are going to retain their original color. And of course, you can mask them out from the areas you don't want. So I suggest you try that. And I think because your images are great, I love the textures, the way you're bringing out the details and textures. I just think you could go a little bit further with those. So that's my critique. And I hope you don't mind that. All right, so we could do something here. Oh man, I'm seeing this. All right, this is begging for sunlight. Okay, we'll go to that in a sec. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this as a smart object in Photoshop. And the reason I'm opening this as a smart object in Photoshop is so I can double click and take it into Camera Raw. So this would be the same if you guys open this directly into Photoshop from Bridge. You would also go into Camera Raw. If you're using Lightroom, the adjustments here are identical. Okay, let's see what we can do with this image. What I want to do is, I see we've got some details up here in the highlights, and we want to recover these details in the highlights. So we're going to go down to the area here. This is our exposure settings, and we can tell because it says exposure on top. This one says white balance, so these are white balance settings. This group are exposure. This group is texture. This group is vibrance. So the first control at the top basically explains what that group does, and they all work together to do the same thing. So we want to play around with the exposure, but we don't want to brighten the whole image, because if we do that, because we want to see the detail here, so what happens, we lighten that up. We can see there it's too bright there. If you want to bring down the light there, you can see the detail, but now it's too dark. So we just move to highlights and shadows, and they do exactly what they say. They recover highlights and shadows. They don't boost highlights and shadows. They recover highlights and shadows. I mean, you can boost your lights there, but don't do that. Use whites for boosting and blacks for boosting. Use highlights and shadows for recovery. So let's recover our highlights, bring it to the left. Boom, beautiful. Now we've got the texture there, but notice it didn't affect the shadows. See that? Those shadows are unaffected. And same thing with the shadows. Let's open up those shadows, and notice we're opening those up without affecting the highlights. See how the highlights are preserved? We're just hitting those shadows. And you might bring the exposure just a little bit just to balance that. And to do that, we're going to go back on the highlights and maybe roll off the shadows to match. And now we're starting to bring out that detail. Now notice I'm leaving a little bit of shadow in here. Now this is my personal taste. I want to leave a little bit. I don't want to just open up every shadow and open up every highlight, because even though your eyes adjust as you look at different things, your irises are always opening and closing, your pupils, and you want to have a little bit of shadow, a little bit of highlight in your image, because the shadows define the shapes and the forms of the images. And they can also have mystery in there. And so a lot of great storytelling can be told from shadows. I know a lot of filmmakers, like not so much these days, but more in the past, videographers would just light everything evenly and make sure they got rid of every shadow. But now people are realizing those shadows are really useful. So I'm going to leave a little shadow, but we can see the detail. We can see what's going on in here. You can see that. All right, so now rather than going to the clarity and going like this and blowing out the clarity, which is going to give you kind of similar to what some of those topaz filters do, or, different things, which is fine. I mean, if you want that, that's great. But one of the newer additions is texture, and I like texture. Notice the difference. If I hit clarity, it brings out the detail, but it gets halos and it makes it look a little fake. Or, maybe illustrative if you guys like that. That's fine. Once again, I'm not judging. But if you take the texture up, notice you can bring out the texture without the image looking so artificial. So sometimes I'll do that. I'll give a little punch of texture. And then with outdoor photos, sometimes they almost always, when you see things like rocks, benefit from a little warmth. Just push that up just slightly. Just warming it up a little bit. And now if you still feeling like it's too contrasty, take that contrast down. Because one of the things that Camera Raw and Lightroom does is it adds a little contrast. A little too much, in my opinion. So take that down and notice we start to see more of the details, and it evens it out. notice if I punch the contrast, it makes more of a change between the highlights and the shadows. If you lower the contrast, it smoothens out those transitions. And what you're losing, you can make up for with the texture slider. Here's the texture slider. See, we can make up for that there. And then also the whites and blacks. So if we look in here, maybe I could push those whites a little bit. Just a touch. Maybe I could push those blacks a little bit. And, and so if we want to see what we've got here, if we look at this before and after, see we're bringing out our detail in our image without it looking artificial. Now, if you want to make it look crunchy like that, you can easily do that. The way to do it is just take the highlights and shadows. So this, what we have here is maybe more my taste. But if you want to go just to your shadows and highlights all the way, and then take your clarity all the way, take your texture all the way, and see, if that's the look you want, this is basically, even dehaze and then lighten it up. This is what you're going to get from a lot of these plugins. So if you want that look, the faux or fake HDR as they call it, you can definitely do it that way as well. So just showing you guys how that can be done. Let me just undo this a couple of times and go to something back to where I kind of liked it. Let's try and shift this redo, edit redo. I always forget. Shift Command Z. There we go. So we're going to redo that. And I kind of like that. I'm going to click OK. And that's our after image. All right, guys. So what we're going to do right now is get your questions and answers ready. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly close this out for the people that need to go and, people that are watching the replay. If you want to keep watching for Q&A and Afterglow, we'll do Q&A, and then Afterglows we just kind of hang out for a little bit. Feel free, stick around for that. And until then, I'm just going to do a quick soft closing for everybody else. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to tune in to Live from Lockdown every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube and photoshopCAFE. If you like this, do me a big favor, hit that like button right now. That helps us with the algorithm, lets YouTube know that we're streaming. And if you haven't yet become part of the Cafe crew, we'd love to welcome you. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and you'll get a new video from me every week. So thanks, guys. Until next time, I'll see you at the cafe. All right. There we go. So, the official part of the program's over. I know some people have got a jet. So, hey, thanks for joining us, guys. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. And for everyone that wants to hang out, just hang out, guys, for a couple of minutes. And we'll jump into the Q&A. And also, we will jump into our Afterglow. So, don't ask the questions just yet because we got a bunch of people are going to be saying goodbye, ciao, see you later. And we don't want to get all the questions mixed up in there because it's I might miss them. So all right, so oh man, look at all the all the regulars here. Good to see you guys. Klaus, Russ B, Russ or just Russ, of course. We got Tracy. Good to see you. Rod Shelley, Sandy, Louis or Lewis, Photo Maker, Rod Coleman, Ruby, John Oswald, Jerry Powell. Rod Shelley, and all right, all regulars. Good to see you guys. Glad you're all here. And it doesn't look like people are really dropping off right now. So, it's always just a little bit delayed by a couple of minutes there. Hannah, good to see you. Another regular. Tim, good to see you. Paul, great to see you. Gigi, another regular. Good to see you. Karen. All right. Charles needs more glow in his life. Hi, Ryan. Howdy to you, too. Your edit of Tony Mule's Dripping Springs photo was spot on. Well, thank you, Bug Bob as Wild World. That's a cool name. I like your handle. That's pretty cool. And thanks. And thank you for Tony. It doesn't look like you're here this week, so you're watching the replay. Thanks, Tony, for submitting your photos. And don't forget, guys, you can submit yours too. Fixmyphoto.net. Just uploaded there. All right. Good to see you guys. I'm glad you're all here. And thanks for the compliments there. So we got through another week 41. So before we get into our real afterglow, why don't you guys go ahead and got your questions? Just drop your questions in there right now, and we'll do a few questions. Can we submit a photo to fix my photo, FMP, but was a scan negative? Yeah, of course. Yep. Yes, of course. If you don't have a DSLR, Jim, yeah, just any photos that you have, just give us the best quality that you can get me. Sunsets in Florida, I bet you those are beautiful. Yeah, so please go ahead. Yeah, just drop them in there. You know, they don't have to be raw photos. Just if you have raw, that's great. If not, oh, Tony, good to see you, man. I hope you enjoyed the edit. I hope we did justice to your beautiful photos, and thank you for continually submitting your photos. And hopefully my tips or my critique wasn't harsh. Thanks, Tony. Donald Becker is asking, what is tension stacking? I have absolutely no idea. I will Google it. Let's find out. Tension stacking. Tension stacking. How to use dynamic tension to make photos more dramatic. And they want me to sign up for something. Okay, let's go somewhere else. It's probably something we know, but we call it something else. Before and after tension stacking. Let's have a look. I have no idea. Not familiar with that term. I'll look it up, and we'll get you something on that. How does that sound? I'm curious about it, and if anyone knows what tension stacking is, drop it in there. I'm curious. You know, is it slide sandwich, or sometimes there's so many different names for techniques. You know, Stuart Braithwaite, good to see you there, buddy. Glad you're here. Off to get coffee. I'm actually drinking. Believe it or not, I'm drinking herbal tea this week. It's delicious. It's actually a throat one to help my throat. My throat is fine, but just sometimes when I'm talking for an hour, it can get raspy, and this is actually just kind of helping me a little bit. Don't worry, I'm not sick. Just basically, when you're hanging out in the house all the time, I don't notice if you guys get it. You yell at the wife or husband or kids, or even just talking on the phone, you get atrophy because you're not talking all the time like you normally are. And so I'm just walking around here, not really talking a ton. And then so when I do these live streams, sometimes it can be hard on my throat because it's not used to being exercised. So that's why I'm trying this tea. It's a yogi throat tea. I've tried throat coat, which works really well. This works pretty good too. And it's not sponsored, of course. If it is, if Yogi Tea are watching, send me some tea. I'll give you a shout out. All right. Enjoy your coffee, Stuart. I still love coffee, obviously. PhotoMaker, if we clip a gradient to extruded 3D text, will it wrap entirely around the text or be viewable on all sides? If it's already extruded and you're just overlaying it over the 3D model, no, it's just going to go flat. But if you go into the surfaces inside the model, you can apply it to each surface or each texture. Let me just create a new document. I'll show you what I mean just real quick. So let's just do a 3D model. So say we go in here and we apply a mesh of something. I don't know. I was going to show you guys how to create pyramids and cubes and stuff too with gradients. Maybe we'll do that another time. So let's do it with let's do a cube because it's got more than one surface. Pardon me. So we get the cube, we'd wrap it around here. And then if we overlay, the gradient, the gradient is just going to overlay, as you can see here, our image. Now, if you wanted to apply it to a surface, we could grab, the material, like something like maybe this one. So let's do the top material. Double click on it, brings us into a window here. So it opens it like a smart object. And then I apply the gradient inside of here. Let's just apply that gradient. It's fine. And I'm just going to save it, close it. Whoa, what happened there? Did I hit Control Z instead? Probably did. Control S. There we go. Save that. Get rid of it. Now that gradient's applied to that surface. And if you want to apply it to a different area, double click it. Oh, not there. Double click the name. Apply the gradient. Save it. Close it out. And now you can see that we're starting to apply those, to the different surfaces. Those gradients will be applied. You might not see it because of the light source. Let me move the light source over. Let's go over here and rotate this around. It's one of those surfaces that we got. And let's go here. Yep, now I'm on lighting. Let me get back out of lighting. How do I get back to my model? Textures, whatever. Somewhere in here. Here we go. 3D mode. So I click the lighting again. Yeah, there we go. So it's in here somewhere. Just not necessarily seeing it, but you need to play around with the lighting. Oh, because I hit those. There we go. Let's hit the base color, textures. Anyway, but that's how you would do it. You would just go into those edges like that. I think you guys get the idea. All right, so let's get back to questions. Tension stacking. I'm still curious about that. We'll look that up. Can you style gradients like the neutral density filter in Nick? Yeah, sure you can. Absolutely. And, what you would do is just use a foreground color to transparent, or you could go in and add stops, however you want to do it. Yes, you can. And all you're doing, and all Nick's doing is essentially just applying that gradient with the blending mode over the top. I'll get rid of that so we get rid of the hall of mirrors, because that's probably freaking you guys out there. All right, what do we got here? Rod Shelley. Sandy, I know you keep asking me this, don't you? And sometimes I miss you. What Wacom tablet would you recommend for beginner and beginner in Photoshop? It depends on, beginner means is this something you're going to be doing forever, or you're just trying out Photoshop to see if it's something you want to do. But I would recommend this tablet here, which is the Intuos Pro medium-sized tablet. It's just really good. It's a great size, and it has great pen pressure and pretty much does everything. Small would also work well for a lot of people. Retouchers sometimes prefer the small. And if you don't have the budget for that, just use a Intuos, which used to be called a Bamboo. And if you really want to just save money, find a used Bamboo on Craigslist or something like that. You could probably pick it up for $50 or something. I don't know. That would be another way. But if you have the budget, the Intuos Pro is really nice. If not, the Intuos doesn't have the express keys, touch rings as much, like these controls. And also the pen pressure is not quite as good. And also it doesn't get the Pro pen. The Intuos Pro gives you this pen here, which just feels nice. And it has 8,196 levels of pressure sensitivity versus like 1,000. So those are the big differences. But I know there's other brands and I haven't tried them. I personally, I love Wacom. I've used Wacom tablets for 20 years. And long before these other companies existed. So, I don't see any reason to change because I'm really happy with them. All right. And what else we got here? Rod, how often do you go out and fly your drones with this pandemic? Honestly, Rod, not much. I have done a little bit, in between things, when things kind of were opened up last summer for a little bit, when the pandemic really eased. I took off to Hawaii for a week. Of course, I had to get tested, when I went and have a test and everything before I could go and, jump through a bunch of hoops. But I figured, when I was there, I was going to be out, out hiking in the wilderness and out in the water and stuff away from everybody anyway. And honestly, there were barely any tourists there, so I had the hotel to myself and didn't really interact a ton with other people. But I was there to do photography, and I took my drone, and it was wonderful. I went to Makapu and was able to climb there. No people at all. I wouldn't travel right now because things are just kind of crazy, but that was where there was a little bit of a lull. And also everyone on the plane was tested, and they distanced us on the plane, and we wore masks and everything. So, not being foolish with COVID, but there was a little window of opportunity, which is long closed as far as I'm concerned right now. But anyway, yeah, so I flew my drone there. Around here, I'm not doing it a ton. I'm charging up my batteries right now, though, and hopefully I'm going to get out some point, hit the beach or something. And just, if I can do it socially distanced away from other people, then, yeah. But the thing about a drone is it, attracts people. And, that even happened to me, when they had that the two stars aligned recently and I was out shooting. And it was the evening time, and I was out shooting the stars out by myself, and of course, a couple of people just come up from LA and standing right next to me, maskless, breathing all over me. So I'm trying to avoid that right now. So yeah. What else we got here? Welcome tablet, we answered that. When recovering shadows, how do you tackle the noise that may appear? That's a great question, Jordan. And a couple of things I do is, one, I try not to open it up too much, where the noise has become prevalent. But if it is, I'll just use the noise reduction right there inside of Photoshop. So what I might do, let me just show you on the screen. I might duplicate this. So here's the thing. If I hit Control J, that makes a duplicate of the smart object. Whatever I do to one is going to apply to the other. They're linked. So they become, a child, a parent and a child. But if I want to have it duplicate it and make a completely unique one, which is not linked to the other one, right click and then choose to create smart object via copy. So this is a brand new smart object. So this means whatever I do to this smart object is not going to affect the other one. So they're not linked. So if I double click, I go in here and I've got the extra one, right? So I'm going to open up these shadows. Let's get some noise going in here. Let's just go, maybe, well, actually not bad. Good shooting there, Tony, for, so of course it's a RAW file. It's a Nikon RAW file. That's why we don't get a lot of noise in here. If it was a JPEG, we might see a lot more noise. So it's a good choice there, shooting that in RAW. So we're opening this up. Let's see, is there any noise in there? Let's zoom into 100%. Yeah, it's a little bit. Not a ton of noise. The camera's actually doing pretty well. All right, so let's go down here. But this is what I would do. As I would go down under let me hold the Control Command key and click here. That collapses all of those arrows at once. Makes it easy for me to go for what I'm looking for. And I'm choosing the detail. And then all I would do is just bring up the noise reduction. Pop open the arrow here. Gives us a little bit more control here. So I would go in there, just reduce that noise. Whatever you need to do to just get that noise down. The color noise is obviously working nicely there. That's what I would do. And then I would, apply that over the top. And then all I want to do is just affect the shadow areas, not the highlight areas. I would just use Blend If. So just go down to the Effects, click Blending Options, pops up here. And under the blending options, I can roll off the highlights. So see what we're doing now is there's the old highlights. Hold down the Alt or the Option key and make sure we're just getting those shadow areas. And I would just use this to blend those in nicely. And what we've essentially done now is, I've gone a bit, it's not complete. I would go in here and push it a little bit more, till you get the nice separation wherever you need to go to get that. So we're only applying this to the, actually, let me go. I think I went the wrong way. I'm sorry, guys. There we go. That's what I want. All right, so now we're just applying those shadow areas in there. I would just do that and then drop the opacity down and then just have a little bit going in there. Actually, it was the other way. And then so I'm just applying that to the shadow area and not to the highlight. Or of course you could just go in normal blend mode here. Get rid of that blending option. Let me go here. The other way is to do it like this. And then just use a mask and just mask out those areas and drop it down. So you don't necessarily want to apply it over the whole image. Now I made this way brighter than I would. You would never make it this bright, but I'm doing that just so you can see the difference between the two layers. But essentially, I would just go in there and, really just hit that noise reduction. And if it's still, affecting the other areas too much, mask it out. But don't, blow it out like it did there. That was just so I could show you two things. One, notice that those smart objects didn't both update together. And then the other thing, so, we could try and get some noise out of the image that didn't have noise. All right, great. Let's move on. Maybe I'll do a separate tutorial on that sometime, because that was a great question. What do we got here? Let's have a look. Oh, okay, I'm just looking for some more questions. I'm just going to bring this. Sorry, guys, if this is going to look weird. Did Bruce have to jet? All right, see you, Bruce. He's already gone, but... okay, so Bug Bob is flying his drone. Rod's got a 22-inch Cintiq. All right. Okay, so I'm losing the questions here now. Okay, see you, David. See you later. All right, guys, so I guess we can just kind of, 20 minutes of Q&A is good. So I guess I could ask you guys, put YouTube in dark mode. Are you asking me to put YouTube in dark mode so we don't get this kind of crazy thing there? Is that hitting you guys in the thing? So anyway, guys, let's do our afterglow. So what do we get here? This is very helpful. I'll watch the replay. Yeah, so how you guys doing? Are you keeping your sanity? Are you being nice to people? Hopefully you guys are surviving okay with the lockdown. No one's sick, I hope. And if you are, hopefully you're not too badly sick. Yeah. So Tracy would like to see more in Blend Diff. Okay. All right, guys. So, Tracy, sanity, what's that? So once again, thanks for joining me, guys. Don't forget, every Tuesday I upload a new tutorial. I've got a new word, tutorial. If you watch my YouTube videos, you guys will get the joke. And I also post the written element on photoshopCAFE. So it's been fun, guys. It's been a blast. And we'll be back next week for episode number 42. So I look forward to that. Dojo, what key do you hold down to slow down the slider movement? You hold down the Alt or the Option key will slow it down, and the Shift key will speed it up. All right, so thanks, guys. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna do a video right now on the the Sony A1. Is anyone interested in the Sony A1? So, I'm definitely getting ready to just drop a video. I'm gonna just do a little talk about what I think about it in a little bit. So I'll be posting that soon, later on today. So I don't know if you guys are interested in that or not, but I'll pop that up on YouTube. So, all right, guys, until next time, I'll see you at the cafe.